So we've heard a lot about the needs of individuals from the associations there to support them, consumer organizations. But obviously, the banking sector has to concern itself with these matters as well. And bank employees are in direct contact with customers, and sometimes they have the difficult task of having to grant people their requests or turn them away. So sometimes they're in a difficult situation. So Mrs. Meyenberg, she's from the CFDT bank. She is with us. We know that in most banking networks, the employees' success is judged on the basis of their ability to sell products, to sell the products of a bank. And commercial needs are not always in line with the needs of people in a difficult situation. So how do you manage to square that circle? Well, that's quite a difficult question, and I'll switch to English now. In fact, in most of the meetings I take part in the European Commission and so on, things are conducted in English. So I'm switching to English now.
Well, actually, I had two questions initially. The first question was quite general, where I was going to repeat things other people from France had said, because I come also from France, that 99% have a bank account, that however 5 to 6 million are excluded from banking services, 2.5 million are filed in the register of payment defaults, and 1.6 million have no right to hold a check account. And that's definitely a problem, because they cannot really participate in society, as you have heard on the definition which was given before. And exclusion from banking services is justified as a result what is called an accident of life, which means divorce, loss of employment, and so on. But we forget very often that it's also very often the main reason is that people are too poor and that they don't earn enough. And that's a trade union problem, actually. So that was my first point. Now, secondly, coming to commercial pressure. Very easy question, or a very difficult question. There we come, because it's a question which is complex, because it goes directly into the commercial policies of banks. And so the question of commercial pressure actually questions the role of the bank in society as such. Is a bank a provider of services? Because the bank has the benefit of implicit and explicit guarantees of the state by having access to a lender of last resort, firstly, and secondly through the deposit guarantee schemes, or is a bank a commercial institutions as other companies in the service industry? In France, the social dimension of banks as providers of basic services is organized by several laws: access to the bank account and so on, what we've heard before, to basic services, to savings accounts, sort of provisions for bank tariffs. However, the exclusion persists, and therefore legal aspects alone do not seem to explain the phenomenon entirely. The situation of advising customers on a financial product is not univocal. Customers exposed to financial exclusion might need a different and more profound advisory service than other types of clients to compensate for a possible lower level of education, of financial education. However, the contrary is often true. Sales pressure and excessive sales targets with its incentive structures often exclusively encourage the sale of products instead of leaving time to give advice. Incentive structures in banks shape profoundly the way the relation to the client is conducted. In many banks, pressure is very strong, and in some, bank hierarchy asks every day, how much have you sold? How many meetings did you have? And there are also IT controls on meetings and on the number of appointments bank employees have taken. The financial incentives you can gain by selling products are in levels which range around up to 1,500 euro per month, per term, sorry. And that's a lot, considering that these employees are often at the minimum sales levels. We're not talking about traders, obviously. We're talking about really basic employees. And sales campaigns also orientate the sale of the marketing of certain products. This may be credit cards, term deposits, or sometimes it's insurance products, where for a month the hierarchy says, well, you have to go on one product and you have to sell as much as possible. So you offer it to everybody. At the moment, for example, when we go to banks, there are very many banks offer term accounts because French banks need deposits in order to comply with the liquidity ratios of Basel III. So you go into a bank and you are almost sure to get an offer for some sort of term account. So these campaigns give employees the opportunity to gain additional variable remuneration. Some products which are now offered in banks, such as insurances, for example on mobile phones or for accidents, or telephone subscriptions, create additional expenses which may be potentially dangerous for fragile clients. I've talked with some of my colleagues in banks, and I mean, I was quite surprised. They work in the department 93, which is in the north of Paris, with lots of poor people. And well, I learned that they sell lots of insurances for mobile phones because these people use a lot their mobile phones. So employees, in fact, are trapped in a catch-22 situation. Either they comply with the objectives and may sell products which are not necessarily adapted to the client, although there are, of course, internal rules which say you have to make a product-client adaptation, but that's theory, in fact. Or employees do not meet their targets, and then, well, either they have a bad, either they get no bonus, or it's more a prime, it's not really a bonus, or they may even be dismissed because they don't meet their targets on a continuous basis. And in banking, basically two attitudes prevail. For the older and more experienced employees, the provision of correct services is important, and they may be ready to resist to further sales pressure, or they also have the means to resist because they have more experience. And the younger ones often are ready to sell anything to increase their variable part of the wage. Well, they haven't had any other experience, actually, because this kind of sales pressure built up in the recent years. In one cooperative bank, the personal relation to the client was also put forward, and the bank seemed more ready in searching for a solution for fragile clients. It's also because the colleague I talked to said, well, anyway, if we would not accept the bank account, the Banque de France, because then you need to get a paper by the bank. You go to Banque de France, and Banque de France is obliged to give you another name of bank, which is obliged to take your account. And so they said, well, anyway, they would send us back to this cooperative bank. So they are more social, both by obligation but also by personal conscience. Okay, the sales targets and the incentive structures which determine the variable part of the salary are decided top-down, and they are not negotiated with the trade unions. They can be either totally individualized, and that's very often the case, or they can depend on the collective activity of an agency. That's the case in a cooperative bank, which just introduced these kind of variable pay systems. In this respect, the use of sales targets and incentive structures exclusively encouraging sales of financial products should be avoided. Incentive structures should be made more transparent, and this is, for example, a requirement of the MiFID directive, but the MiFID directive doesn't apply to basic services, it applies more to the sale of financial products as such. It should be ensured that remuneration and incentive systems, as well as working practices, are appropriate and put customers first. And they should advocate and reward prudent advice, not to put the employee in a conflict of interest, and ensure customers' trust to the provider, to the bank. And employees should, of course, receive sufficient training to explain products and services correctly. Customers exposed to financial exclusion are the weakest and likely to have a lower level of financial education, and they're therefore the likely victims for the sale of unsuitable products. So that's something we advocate at trade unions, but it's very difficult actually, because the reality on the in the banks is that people have tremendous sales pressure, and so they're really obliged to do things in order either to gain additional salary or just to keep their jobs. Thank you.